Hello, thank you for choosing StripSearch, an easy way to find apps requiring only those Android permissions you're comfortable with. Let's start with the basics, providing an account for authentication. There are two methods to do this, as explained in the introductory instructions, which you probably should read. Since manually specifying a login and password is fairly self-explanatory, I'll use the StripSearch Auth plugin instead. After downloading the plugin, StripSearch automatically detects its presence. However, it may take a little while for the plugin to register. Once the StripSearch Auth plugin has been detected, you'll be prompted with this authorization dialog. Please note that, short of a factory reset, there is no easy way to change your mind later. Either StripSearch will always be able to authenticate via your phone or tablet's primary account, or it will never be able to authenticate with that account. Treat this decision as final. That said, a manually input login and password can always be used later. This decision only applies to authentication through the StripSearch Auth plugin. Let's grant it access. Now that we've authenticated, we're ready to search for an app, Minesweeper, for example. First, let's search without any filtering. As you might expect, all Minesweeper apps, regardless of the permissions required, appear as search results. You can determine the permissions required by an app by clicking on the StripSearch icon in the app listing. This one, for example, requires access to the network state. I can click on a permission to obtain a brief text summary of what that permission actually entails. You may also notice that some of the permissions are red. This means that either individual permissions or combinations of permissions are potentially concerning. This app, for example, requires internet access as well as access to the phone's state, meaning that your phone's device ID could be transmitted and tracked by ad modules in order to serve targeted ads. This is just a possible use, though, and the presence of red permissions does not mean that an app is malicious. It just means that an app is requesting potentially sensitive information that probably warrants a second look. For more information on concerning permissions and permission combinations, I'd suggest looking at Izzy's site mentioned in the video summary. Now let's restrict the search substantially using the filter Paranoia Strikes Deep. This filter basically excludes any apps requiring commonly used permissions. As you can see, only apps that require basically no permissions are now listed. If you're interested in seeing exactly which permissions are filtered during a search, simply long-click the Filter selection box. If the selected filter relies on other existing filters, they will be displayed by default. Click on the expansion boxes to see which permissions are associated with each subfilter. As you can see, a filter can be comprised of a hierarchy of other filters. If you just want to see the permissions, select Permissions Only, and the hierarchy will be ignored. For those filters without a hierarchy, only the permissions associated with that filter are displayed, and the selection between hierarchy or no hierarchy is disabled. Note that you're not limited to the default filter selection offered by StripSearch. You can create your own filters or modify existing filters as well. For example, let's search for a flashlight app. As you can see, most of the apps require all sorts of permissions to run, and some don't even actually use the phone's flashlight. Let's try again with the filter Paranoia Strikes Deep. This time, the results are fairly limited, and none use the hardware flashlight. Why is this the case? Because Paranoia Strikes Deep doesn't allow apps that require most hardware permissions. Including the flashlight permission. However, I can modify the filter to require flashlight usage. Unfortunately, as you can see, there are very few apps that actually adhere to this criterion. Instead, let's create a filter to exclude apps that require communication and location permissions. We just want a flashlight after all. And being a flashlight, let's find apps that actually use the flashlight permission. Alright, now let's search using this newly created filter. The resulting apps listed now are basically flashlights without the potential adware or spyware cruft of the unfiltered search listings, but with a broader selection than the Paranoia Strikes Deep with the flashlight allowed search. If this is a useful filter, perhaps you might like it listed higher in the filter selection list. If that's the case, just move it to the position you'd like it to occupy by dragging the filter as follows. Now that filter is listed in the position that I would like it listed. If you want to remove other filters, you can also do that. That's accomplished in the same Add Modify menu as before. However, you cannot remove filters that are required by other filters. I can't remove the security filter, for example, because Paranoia Strikes Deep relies on it. If I remove Paranoia Strikes Deep, though, I can then remove the security filter as well. At this point, you may have made some changes that you don't like. If you want to return to the default filter selection, just do so in the settings as follows. As you can see, the default filter selection is restored. While in the Settings dialog, you may have noticed some other useful features. For example, let's change the color scheme and limit our search results to only free apps. I could also use a specific Google account as previously mentioned in this Settings dialog. I could use a dummy account, for example, instead of the phone or tablet's primary account if you're uncomfortable with granting StripSearch limited access to that account. Anyway, now that we have our desired settings in place, let's search again for the free Minesweeper apps that are essentially just Minesweeper. If I actually click on one of the results, I'll be directed to that app's listing in Google's Play Store, either through Google Play or a browser. Anyway, that concludes this overview of the StripSearch basics. I hope that you find StripSearch useful and take a moment to look at other apps I've developed at hasslefixes.com. Please feel free to provide feedback and ratings for StripSearch. Thank you.